A man at the airport tried to take my first-class seat, smirking. I deserve it more than you. You look like you belong in economy. When I refused to move, he shouted. I paid good money for this flight. Moments later, a flight attendant walked over, saying, Sir, you're right, you do have a new seat. On the next flight out. His smug smile disappeared as security escorted him off the plane. This happened last year, but I still think about it almost every time I board a plane now. It was petty. It was loud. It was public. And honestly, it was kind of beautiful. I'm not a flashy guy. I don't wear suits when I fly. Usually it's sneakers, a hoodie, sometimes a beat-up baseball cap. I'm in my mid-40s, travel a lot for work, like, a lot. Consultant stuff. I rack up miles and points just by breathing near a plane at this point. So, because of how often I fly, I get upgraded to first class a lot. It's not something I ever brag about or make a big deal out of. Just part of the job. But that day? Oh man. That day, first class turned into an arena. I was flying from JFK to LAX, which is a pretty long flight, almost 6 hours. I'd just finished a 3-week project in DC that was draining every part of me. I barely slept the night before, had back-to-back client meetings, and hadn't seen my kid in almost a month. I was running on fumes, and all I wanted was to sit in my comfy seat, drink some ginger ale, and zone out for a few hours. I got to JFK early, went through security without any issues, and killed time in the lounge like I usually do. Flight was on time. Everything was going smooth. I checked the app, confirmed, seat 1A, first class, window. My usual. Got the notification to board, and I headed to the gate with my little carry-on. I was in group 1, as always. Boarded early, walked on, found my seat. 1A, first one on the left. Window seat. Extra legroom. Heaven. I put my bag in the overhead bin, sat down, got comfortable. People started boarding. No big deal. Then this guy, tall, mid-30s, slicked back hair, very tight dress shirt, walks onto the plane like he owns it. Right away I noticed the way he was looking around. Kind of scanning. Eyes jumping from seat to seat. He sees me, sitting in 1A, and walks straight over. Hey man, he says, standing over me. You're in my seat. I didn't even look up right away. I thought he was just mistaken. I said, I don't think so. This is 1A. He didn't move. Just stood there. Yeah. That's my seat. I looked up. He's smirking. You know that kind of smirk that makes you instantly dislike someone? Like, a full-face smirk. He pulls out his boarding pass, kind of flashes it quickly like it's a badge. I look closer. It says 26C. I blinked. You're in economy, man. That's way back there. He doesn't even flinch. Doesn't act surprised. He just shrugs and says, Yeah, but they messed up. I was supposed to be upgraded. I say, Well, they didn't. And I'm already sitting here. I didn't mess anything up. He sighs. Loudly. Like he's being put out by me. Then he gives me that look, the one people give when they think they're better than you. I mean, come on, he says. You don't look like you belong in first class anyway. I just stare at him. He continues. I paid good money for this flight. I think I should be here. You don't look like you fly first class very often. At this point I can't even tell if he's serious or just trolling. I look down at myself, hoodie, jeans, sneakers. I guess to him that means I don't fit in, or whatever. I reply calmly. You paid good money for seat 26C. That's where you're supposed to be. He laughs, like he knows something I don't. Then he puts his bag in the overhead bin above me, my overhead bin, and starts sitting down in the seat next to me. Like really trying to claim it. I stop him. Seriously, man. You're not sitting here. I'm not moving. He says again. You don't belong here. Louder this time. At that moment, the flight attendant comes over. Her name tag says Sarah. She's mid-30s maybe, short hair, no-nonsense vibe. She asks what's going on. He's in my seat. The guy says immediately. There's been a mistake. She asks for boarding passes from both of us. I show her mine. 1A, clear as day. She takes his, looks at it for half a second. Sir, this says 26C. He shrugs. I was told I'd be upgraded. She's calm. Well, that's not what this says. He raises his voice. This is ridiculous. I paid for this flight. I deserve this seat more than him. And gestures at me like I'm a cockroach. People are starting to look. You know how it is, plane boards front to back, so there are people watching this unfold from first class and a few from economy who've made their way down the aisle. I'm still in my seat, saying nothing now. I'm just watching. His face is turning red. He's breathing heavy. Like he's been personally attacked. He starts ranting again about how he deserves the seat, about how he flies all the time, how the airline owes him for a horrible experience last month, how customer service guaranteed him a better seat. Sarah doesn't buy a word of it. She holds up the boarding pass again and says, "Sir, please return to your assigned seat so we can continue boarding." "No. I'm not moving. That's my seat." She sighs and says, "One moment, please." Then she walks toward the front of the plane, into the galley. I can feel the tension. People are whispering. The guy is still standing next to me. I keep my headphones out so I can hear what's going on. Sarah returns. She's not alone. 2 airport security officers are with her. Not TSA, but airline security, uniformed, official, and very serious looking. She says, "Sir, we've reviewed your information. You were not upgraded. You are currently causing a disturbance in the cabin. We're going to have to ask you to deplane." He doesn't move. Like he literally freezes. Blinks a few times. "I paid for this flight," he shouts. "You can't just kick me off." One of the officers says, "Sir, step off the plane voluntarily or we'll assist you." You could have heard a pin drop. I'm not exaggerating, everyone in first class is silent. Even the people walking on are just frozen in the aisle behind him, watching. It's like time slowed down. And then, finally, he breaks. He tries one last time. Looks around at the other passengers. This is insane. Look at him. Pointing at me again. He's not even dressed like he belongs in first class. That was it. Sarah just says, "That's enough." The 2 officers step forward, and the guy finally grabs his Gucci-looking backpack and starts walking off. Muttering under his breath. Swearing. Red-faced. And then, someone in the back, couldn't see who, starts clapping. 1 clap. Then 2. Then more. Next thing I know, half the plane is applauding. I just sit there quietly. I don't say anything. I don't look at him. He walks off, escorted by security, into the jet bridge. Everyone watches him leave. Sarah comes back a few minutes later. Apologizes for the inconvenience. I thank her for handling it. She offers me another drink before we even take off. The whole time, I'm just sitting there thinking, how many times has that guy gotten his way just by being loud, smug, and entitled? Not today. Not on this flight. Not in seat 1A. The applause didn't last long, maybe 10 seconds. But it was enough. The sound of that slow building, sarcastic clap chasing him off the plane was probably echoing in his skull long after he left. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. About 5 minutes after the guy got dragged off, they finished boarding. The last few passengers made their way to the back. Things seemed normal again. A couple of people gave me nods, like I'd done something brave. I hadn't. I just sat still and didn't give up my seat. Sarah passed through the cabin again doing her checks, and I overheard her talking softly to one of the other flight attendants. "He's not on the no-fly list," she said. The other attendant, a younger guy with glasses, asked, "Think he'll try to come back?" "I don't know," she replied. "He said something about making a call. Security's watching the gate." That made me sit up a little straighter. I wasn't nervous exactly, but I was definitely alert now. The guy wasn't just rude, he was the type who couldn't stand being told no. We were still sitting at the gate. 10 more minutes passed. Then 15. The captain came over the intercom to say we were delayed due to a ground handling issue. That's airline code for something's happening we don't want to explain. Another 5 minutes go by. Then I see Sarah walking fast down the aisle toward the back of the plane. The guy with glasses follows her. Now people are murmuring. The woman in 1B leans toward me. "What do you think's going on?" I shrug. "No idea." Then I spot it. Out the window, on the jet bridge, through that little triangle-shaped opening in the curtain, I can see 2 men in suits. They're standing close to each other, speaking with a third man holding a phone to his ear. It's him. It's Brandon. He's not yelling this time. He's talking low, serious. His hand is still holding the phone to his ear, and he's motioning toward the plane. Something's off. A few minutes later, Sarah comes back. She's got a different energy now. She walks directly to me. "Sir?" she says, voice lower than before. "Can I see your boarding pass again?" I blink, but hand it over. She checks it, then hands it back. "Have you flown with us recently?" she asks. "Yeah," I reply. "Last week. Dallas to Boston." She nods. "Hang tight." Before I can ask what that's about, She turns and heads back toward the front. Another announcement comes from the captain. Apologies for the delay, folks. We're just waiting for final clearance from ground control. Should be moving shortly. But we don't move. 20 more minutes pass. People are getting antsy. The guy behind me is sighing loudly every few seconds. The woman in 1B has gone from curious to annoyed. I check the flight app again. Still says, boarding. Then my phone buzzes. Unknown number. I let it ring. Then it buzzes again. Voicemail, one new message. Now I'm getting uneasy. I check it. The voice is scrambled, but I can make out some words. You shouldn't have embarrassed me. You think this is over? Watch yourself. I freeze. I play it again. Same creepy message. Not long, but very clear, it was meant for me. I flag down Sarah again. She sees my face and leans in. Everything okay? I show her the voicemail. She listens. Her mouth tightens. Do you still have that guy's name? I don't, but I bet you do. She doesn't answer but takes out a small tablet, types something quickly, then disappears again. 15 minutes later, the captain makes another announcement. We're returning to the gate briefly. Everyone please remain seated. That never happens unless something serious is going on. The plane jerks slightly as the jet bridge reconnects. A few seconds later, 2 TSA agents walk onto the plane. Behind them is Sarah. She walks straight to me. Mr. Evans, she says, my last name. Can you please come with us for a moment? Now everyone's staring. I stand up, grab my bag, heart racing. I follow the agents off the plane and into the jet bridge. The door closes behind me. One of the TSA agents says, We have reason to believe a threat was made against you by another passenger. Do you know this man? He holds up a phone. It's Brandon's face. Still smug, but now with a little sweat on his forehead. I nod. Yeah. That's him. Did he threaten you directly? Not in person. But I just got a voicemail. They asked me to play it again. I do. They don't say much. Just exchange a glance. Then one of them says, We're pulling him in for questioning. He won't be on this flight. But we're not sure how he got your number. I say, I don't either. It's a business phone. Not easy to get. Sarah looks at me and says, We're going to reboard you now. You'll still have your seat. But please notify us if anything else happens. I nod, still processing everything. As they walk me back down the jet bridge, I glance to the side and see him, Brandon, sitting in a chair, hands clenched, being talked to by another agent. His eyes meet mine for a second. No smirk this time. Just pure, cold hate. I walk past him without saying a word. Back on the plane, people are watching me return like I've just come out of a courtroom. I sit down again in 1A. Sarah gives me a bottle of water, pats me lightly on the shoulder. The doors close. But my brain is spinning now. This guy got kicked off the flight, found a way to get my number, and made a threat. But why go through all that? Over a seat? Unless it wasn't just the seat. Unless this was something else. Something bigger. As the plane finally pulls back from the gate, I stare out the window and wonder, what did I just get dragged into? And why does it feel like it's not over yet? The plane finally took off, nearly an hour late. The hum of the engine settled into a steady rhythm as we climbed above the clouds. Passengers started to relax again, but I couldn't. I kept replaying that voicemail in my head, the words, the tone. You think this is over? There was something about it that didn't sit right. It wasn't just some sore loser lashing out. It was calculated. Like it had purpose behind it. I turned off my phone to save battery, not wanting any more calls for now. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was going on. Sarah checked on me twice in the first hour. Brought me snacks I didn't ask for. Whispered that she'd filled out an incident report. I thanked her, told her I appreciated how she handled it. She smiled, but I could see it in her eyes, she was unsettled too. I put on a movie, but I wasn't watching it. I was thinking, why would this guy go to that length? He was smug, sure. Entitled. But getting your number and leaving a threatening voicemail? That's not normal, not even for airport jerks. Then, halfway through the flight, I got up to use the restroom. I walked past the galley, nodded to one of the attendants, and stepped into the lavatory. It's a tight space, barely room to turn around. I did what I needed to do and washed my hands. As I dried them, I noticed something on the little shelf behind the sink. A folded napkin. Weird. I picked it up. It had writing on it. Asked the flight crew about last Thursday. You're being watched. My stomach dropped. I stared at it for a second, trying to make sense of it. No signature. No name. The handwriting was rushed, but neat. All caps. Someone had gone out of their way to get this to me. But how? I stepped out of the lavatory, looking around. Everyone was in their seats. Flight crew in the galley, talking quietly. No one even glanced at me. I walked back to 1A, sat down, and stared at the napkin. Last Thursday. I racked my brain. Where was I last Thursday? Dallas to Boston. Client meeting with a small startup. Nothing out of the ordinary. Except, wait. There was a guy in that meeting. He wasn't on the invite. Said he was with the firm's new cybersecurity partner. Dressed sharp. Didn't say much. Just watched, mostly. I remember him now because he kept fiddling with his phone. Not typing, just swiping through screens like he was monitoring something. Couldn't have been Brandon. Different guy. Still, something about that whole meeting had felt weird. The client was distracted. Almost nervous. I chalked it up to stress at the time. Now I wasn't so sure. I pressed the call button. Sarah came over quickly. I showed her the napkin. Her face changed. Just a little. Like she was trying not to react, but couldn't help it. Where did you find this? She asked. In the lavatory. On the shelf. She took the napkin, folded it, and slipped it into her pocket. Don't mention this to anyone else, she said. Please. I'll have to notify the pilot. The pilot? I asked. She nodded. If someone on board is trying to contact you secretly, we have to take it seriously. I sat back and watched her walk away. The guy in 2C leaned over and asked what was going on. Nothing, I said. Just a weird note. But that wasn't the end of it. 10 minutes later, a different flight attendant came to my seat. Older man, white hair, calm voice. Sir, he said, the captain would like to see you in the cockpit. Now, I've flown a lot. That doesn't happen. Passengers don't get invited into the cockpit mid-flight unless something's up. I followed him past the galley, past the curtain, and into the small space just outside the flight deck. The door opened. The captain, mid-50s, firm handshake, looked serious. He didn't waste time. We've been made aware of a possible ongoing threat involving your previous flights. I don't want to alarm you, but the note you received connects to a series of reports from other flights involving the same passenger who was removed earlier. Brandon? I asked. Yes. He's not just a troublemaker. TSA's flagged him as a person of interest. He's been involved in 3 separate disturbance reports in the past month. Always on different airlines. Always targeting random passengers. What kind of disturbances? The captain looked me straight in the eye. He follows people. Gets close to them. Collects personal data. Sometimes after the flights, he shows up at their offices, or calls their family members. Claims to be doing market research or fraud investigations. It's not clear what he's after. But you're not the first. I swallowed hard. And the napkin? We believe someone on this flight may have been tracking him. Or you. Maybe both. I felt dizzy. What started as a petty seat dispute was turning into something else. Something I didn't understand yet. The captain continued. We've notified the FBI. When we land, they'll want to speak to you. And you're not leaving the airport alone. I nodded slowly. Do you think I'm in danger? We don't know, he said. But we're not taking chances. I walked back to my seat in a daze. I didn't watch a movie. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I sat still in 1A, gripping my armrest, staring out the window into the black sky, wondering who the hell I sat next to last Thursday, and who else was still watching me now. We landed at LAX just after midnight. The city lights below looked calm and quiet, like nothing bad could ever happen there. But my head was spinning. I didn't feel calm. I felt watched. As we taxied to the gate, Sarah came by again. There's going to be someone waiting at the jet bridge, she said quietly. They'll take you aside for a few minutes. Don't worry, we're with you. I nodded, but my palms were sweating. The door opened. Everyone stood to get their bags. I stayed seated, as instructed. Sarah stood by me, subtly keeping anyone from crowding me. She gave the rest of the passengers a polite smile, but I could feel her eyes scanning every face. When most of the plane had emptied, 2 people stepped on, both in dark suits. They flashed IDs. FBI. Mr. Evans? One of them asked. I stood. Come with us, please. They led me down the jet bridge, not saying much. When we reached the terminal, we didn't go out to baggage claim. We went through a side door, down a hallway, into a private security room. That's where I saw him again. Brandon. He was sitting in a chair, hands cuffed in front of him. His shirt was untucked, hair a mess, face pale. Still, he looked at me like he had nothing to lose. The agent next to me said, "He insisted on speaking to you directly. Against our advice. He says he has something you need to hear." I should have said no. I should have walked away. But something in me needed answers. I stepped into the room. The agent stayed with me. Brandon looked up. "You don't even know who you are, do you?" he said. I blinked. "What?" He laughed, a little unhinged. "I wasn't trying to take your seat. That was bait." I said nothing. Let him talk. "You remember Boston last week?" he continued. "Your little meeting with those startup guys?" "Yeah. You ever wonder why I knew your name, your number, your seat?" My stomach twisted. "I was hired," he said. "Not to hurt you. Just to rattle you. Shake the tree. See what falls." "Hired by who?" He grinned. "The same people you shook hands with in Boston. That new cybersecurity partner you met? Not legit. A front. You walked into a trap, man. You gave them everything." I stared at him, my heart pounding. "You're full of it," I said. But I didn't believe myself. He leaned forward. "You opened a document for them, didn't you? Let them plug in a flash drive. All they needed was one click. One tiny click from a trusted consultant." The room went cold. I remembered it. The USB drive. "We just need to test the data flow," the guy had said. "Harmless." I watched him plug it in. I didn't think twice. "You gave them access to the entire client network." "Everything," Brandon said. "Financials. Credentials. Product code. Patents. They're probably dumping it all right now." I stepped back. "They wanted to see how you'd react under pressure," he added. "They wanted to know if you'd fold. And guess what? You did exactly what they thought. Sat there quiet. Let someone else handle it." I wanted to hit him. Instead, I turned to the agent. "Is any of this true?" The agent didn't answer. That told me everything. Brandon leaned back, satisfied. "You weren't the target." "Not really. You were the tool. They escorted me out after that. I wasn't arrested. I wasn't charged. But I wasn't free either. For the next 2 weeks, I was caught in a storm I couldn't escape. Calls from legal teams. From the company. From angry clients. I had to sit in meetings with people I'd known for years, explaining how I'd been duped. I had to admit I opened the door. No one screamed. No one threw things. The betrayal was worse than that. It was quiet. One executive, a guy I'd worked with since my 20s, looked at me with tired eyes and said, "We trusted you, man. You were supposed to know better." I did know better. I just got too comfortable. Too used to being the expert in the room. That voicemail? That napkin? All part of a stress test. Not just to rattle me, but to prove how easily a trusted person can make a dumb mistake when they feel safe. Turns out Brandon was part of some gray area contractor group that tests companies for vulnerabilities, ethically questionable, legally slippery. Sometimes they're hired to expose weaknesses. Other times, they go rogue and sell those weaknesses. Still not clear which this was. One of the agents later told me. He was never supposed to make contact. That part was personal. He didn't explain more. I resigned 2 weeks later. Not fired, but pushed. Quietly. The kind of push that doesn't come with a pink slip, just a long silence and an empty inbox. I spent weeks after that sitting in my garage, staring at nothing. I ignored most calls. Skipped my daughter's piano recital. Told her I was sick. I wasn't sick. I was humiliated. I still can't get his words out of my head. You were the tool. The worst part? He was right. I wasn't targeted because I was important. I was targeted because I wasn't paying attention. Because I was too comfortable in 1A, thinking the hoodie made me invisible. I've started rebuilding slowly. Smaller contracts. Tighter vetting. No more flash drives. Ever. I check every face now. I stay off public Wi-Fi. I don't assume anything's safe. I still fly. But I sit in the back now. And when people ask why I gave up consulting full-time, I tell them. One wrong click at 30,000 feet. Because sometimes, the scariest part of the fall isn't the ground rushing up at you. It's realizing you already opened the door. And they were watching the whole time.